So just kind of to bring this back to land plants, I want to highlight the differences in the land plants relative to their green algae relatives. So land plants arose from a green algae ancestor, and along the way they were getting onto land, and they had to take on some adaptations that allowed them to deal with living on land and going about their life, getting photosynthesis done away from the water. So we've talked about spores before. This is a single cell as part of the life cycle that's able to withstand harsh environmental conditions, also able to disperse to places that are maybe suitable for new colonization. Other features, we've talked maybe about this feature on the right here, the ability of the mother plant, so the plant that had the egg cell in it, to actually deliver some nutrients to the developing embryos. The diploid organism that results from photosynthesis actually gets its nutrients from the, what we call the mother plant or the maternal plant, the plant that had the egg cell. And that allows basically an established plant, as we see in the non-vascular land plants, this gametophyte plant is established, it's doing photosynthesis, it can get its own nutrients and water. And so it's helping the next generation along, because the conditions might be harsh and not really favor that zygote embryo getting established out in the world on its own. So it helps it along, similar to what we see in some animals where the newly born animals need some nutrients, some protection as they get established. And it's a little while until they're on their own. So same thing we see in some plant groups. The middle one we haven't talked about before, but is worth highlighting. That is, plants moved onto land, they also have, in all the land plants we have now, this difference between male and female gamete size and relative investment. So plants have the same, very similar features that what we have as animals. Large egg cells that are few cells are made as a result of meiosis. And there's a lot more nutrient investment in each cell. That cell, the egg cell, stays on the plant to be nourished after fertilization. The male component, on the other hand, the male objective is lots of numbers, maybe exploring new environments where eggs might be located, so chance to send a lot of these out into the world, and minimal investment in each one. So this is just thick with lots and lots of sperm cells that all will be released in search of egg cells. Meanwhile, the egg cells are few, larger, and a little more costly to produce. So we'll talk about that a little bit later from a reproductive investment standpoint. So I think we've talked about these before, sure seems familiar. So spores with thick walls protecting against drying out. Sperm cells and egg cells, having them as different sizes kind of separates out the roles. So ultimately, for fertilization to happen, we need a male and a female to get together. And if they're both swimming around looking for each other, it's not necessarily required. We can have one that's seeking and one that is really just meant to be found. So the egg can stay in place and be found by the swimming sperm cells, and that way the relative investment can be larger for the egg cell. It doesn't have to be small enough to move. It can be bigger and therefore have more nutrients stored up inside that go forward to the next generation after fertilization. And then having lots of sperm cells gives them each, gives the plant that produces sperm cells lots of chances to find egg cells and successfully fertilize. We talked about this before, so this is a sporophyte being nourished by the host plant, the mother plant, and then producing lots of spore cells as a result of that. And after fertilization, that can cause the products of fertilization to become bigger, basically because they're being helped out in their development by the maternal plant. So it's quite a few evolutionary stages down the way, but we can also look at the fruiting plants and think about the investment in producing seeds, producing fruits. This is something also that the mother plant does basically increase the size of a seed, the size of a fruit, the nutrient investment to increase the chances of success for that seed as it goes on its way. So very advantageous. Kind of interesting here. So if you think about maternal or mother plants giving nutrients to their offspring plants, there's a structure in plants called a placenta, which is very much like the placenta we have in placental mammals. There's this interface here, so this thick line here, showing a difference between the F here is part of the sporophyte, and G is the gametophyte. So the mother plant here at G, and they're closely tied together, and there are these like interweavings of the membrane, or the mother plant membrane is sort of interwoven with the offspring, so giving it lots of space to transmit nutrients across. So they're not the same cells, but they're transferring nutrients across that cellular boundary, quite a few of them, to enable that embryo to grow bigger. All right, and then it all ties together back into this, so another chance to review your life cycle here. I won't go back over it now, but if you wanted to review and quiz yourself on the life cycle, maybe a good place to do it here. All right, I think we'll wrap up on this topic and move on to the next one. Next, on to cells after this.